everyone. Um,
Good evening.
Everyone can hear me, right?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, so I had 30 minutes to break down an interesting concept. What will I do with that 30 minutes? So let me start off with a disclaimer. Interestingly, I will be sharing some of the thoughts that I've lived by. So pardon me, some of these are my own thoughts. I hope at some point in my life they become theories for other people. Having started my business quite early and to a large extent, also learning that leadership itself is not a position. It's more like a personality. I'll just share what works for me. So please, if there's any part of it that you don't agree with, we can always talk about it in the question and the answer part. I also I think there are two briefs. One was about principles of leadership, but the other brief I got was principles of decision making. Right. So just coming in here, I'm literally torn between two, but I'll try to see how best I can combine both. Maybe I would start by breaking down an interesting concept. So my first degree is mathematics. Of course, before my master's degrees and everything else. So I still like to think of things in variables. The fundamental of mathematics is built on what they call functions, function of a function. So you hear stuff like y is equal to f of x, right? I think y is equal to f of x is the fundamental principle upon which every other equation runs. So what does that mean? What is y and what is x? We know all through school, we hated that part, we say find x. But whenever they say find x, what they're really saying is find the cause of a thing, right? So when they say y is equal to f of x, that means x is the reason why y is happening. So let me give a good example. If I say y is equal to growth, and I say x is equal to, say I can say y is equal to f bracket x. I think the best way to explain this is to maybe share my screen. Let me see if I can share my screen. Okay, so can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so sorry, this part starts off a bit not like the most a bit like the technical part, maybe not everyone's first, mathematics not everyone's first love, but just stay with me. The fundamental principle that guides everyone's life is the concept of cause and effects. If people understand that there's a direct correlation between cause and effect, whether it's short term or mid term can be argued, long term, but everything has cause and effect. The fundamental of life is built on plurality. Right. So when they say y is of course fx, two things you must understand. Y is called a dependent variable and x is called an independent variable. Now, what's all this plenty grammar about x and y? Now, every time something happens to y, it's because of x. So we can always name y to be anything. I can always call x anything. So in this case, I'll call y, right, the variable for decisions, right? And x becomes x1, x2, x3, meaning that x can be as multiple things as you want it to be, right? So I'm going to sum up that every great decision, everybody that turns out good, don't forget that we all have 24 hours in a day. Chances are that all of us would probably all still be around the same generations by the time we're leaving this earth. A generation mathematically is about 25.5 years. So most of the people we know in life, we'll lose them within the span of 25.5 years, sometimes including ourselves, right? Now, how come everyone lives in the same time space, right, with the same time share, with the same number of hours in a day, but we all get different results? You can even see it in twins. People who were born by the same parents, same womb, same time, but they turn out differently. The main reason for that is three things, and I've called those three things x1, x2, x3. So this forms the next 30 minutes conversation. One is called objective functions, right? We're all a product of our objective functions. Second one is decision variables. That's decisions that we make, right? And third is the constraints, things that are within us, those things that we call bots in our conversation. So if you understand this conversation pretty well, right, for the next 5-10 years and you practice it, you'll see how even though you're in the same situation as other people, you most likely have a different result. So let me say it again. I know this, let me take it slow. Why is decision making, right? Let me just say why is growth. To move from where you are to where you need to be, it's called growth. Whatever you define as growth, growth in your health, growth in your career, growth in your business, whatever growth means to you, growth in your spirituality. Now, if why is those things, you will never get to those things except you pay attention to the remaining three things. So Y is the growth, X is three things: your objective function, your decision variables, and your constraints. Don't worry, I'll explain what objective functions are, and I'll use examples. I'll define what decision variables are, and I'll define what constraints are. So what does this constraint mean? Independent variables are those things that are what you want to achieve, and then independent variables are the things that will cost you to achieve it. So we'll never achieve anything except we define right our objectives, our decisions, and our constraints. So let me put this now in context, right? In everything you do in life, there are certain things that define where you're going to get to. The first one is called function, objective function. Objective function, let's not make it sound like big grammar. Objective. We're all a product of objectives. How we see life, where we're going to, what we want to be. Once you miss where you want to be, your decisions are naturally going to be different. The decisions are going to perceive that. You can't move as farther as you can't go higher than where you want to be in life. So I'll give a practical example of this. I've seen people live lives or make business decisions those decisions are a product of what their original motives are. So if you must change anything, you must first start from what you want to be. I think different theories, different case studies, different knowledge areas and field of studies have different names of this nomenclature. And in psychology, those three variables are what you call we do have. So you can never have the right things if you don't define first what you want to be. It's what you want to be that determines what you will do. What you do will determine what you would have. The problem is that most times we want to have certain things without trying to be certain things. So for example, it's literally impossible, right, to have money if you haven't decided the person you want to be. So let me give a good example. Why do you want to be successful? Becomes a driver to how much you will drive the money you want to have, right? There's so many contexts around this, but as we keep going, we'll get to understand it, right? So I'm going to spend a bit of time explaining the first thing around what I like to call objective functions, right? Objective function starts up with what is your big picture? What is the biggest picture you have of everything? A few years ago, an Egbon said something to me and it was really important. And he said that, and it was one time I was struggling with growth in my business. I mean, I started my business at I think 21, 22, right? And I got to a point where I felt like I'd hit a ceiling. I wasn't going to grow anything more than that. And then the guy said something interesting to me. I said, Eizu, the easiest way for you to scale your business is take your average staff, right? And ask your average staff where they want to be in life, right? Or how much they want to earn. I said, okay. He said, when you decide what your average staff, your average guy you have, what his ideal salary is, right? And now start to build the kind of business that can hire that type of staff and pay that type of staff that amount of money. That it changes how you run your business. So the problem you have is that when you look at your business, the only person you see in your business is yourself. How about you close your eyes and look at your business and see the average staff? So when he said that, I started to pay more attention to not what I want to be, but what my staff want to be. Now, remember, this question is about objective function. So my function changed from I to we. So I look at my average staff and I ask myself questions like, where does this guy want to be? What kind of company does he want to work in? First of all, I realized that my average staff does not want to work in a one-man business, right? My average staff does not want to work in a company where he doesn't have Saturdays and Sundays to himself. Now, remember me, Saturday and Sundays to myself is also my work, Hexavia work. But that's me, right? So I think that one of the most powerful things you can do to define your objective function is to move from looking at whatever you do, including your everyday actions, from your perspective. One of the biggest, I've seen people who struggle in life, and one of the things I've seen as a correlation with almost everyone that's struggling in life is how they have certain statements, how they make certain statements. I'm yet to see anybody that makes it out big simply by saying stuff like, it's my life, I can live it how I want to live it. Matter of fact, I look around my circles, my maybe childhood friends, people who maybe grew up in the same environment as me, sometimes even family, and I find out that those people who say stuff like, it's my life, I can live how I want to live, Let me give you an example. Maybe you have, say, a friend who smokes, and everybody's telling him, stop smoking. And he says to himself, is it not my body? Is it not my lungs? Is it your cancer? Like Nigerians like to say, is it your problem? Now, when you look at people like that, you realize that there's a fundamental challenge with their decision making. Now, it's easy to think of their problem as remember, there are three variables: objective function, decision variables, and constraints. Now, the easiest trap to fall into is that the guy is, maybe, let me just an example of smoking. The guy is smoking because of his decisions. No, he's not smoking because of decisions. He's smoking because of how he looks at life. He thinks he's the center of life. He doesn't see other people that his decisions are affecting. So there's actually things that precede decision. And one of them is perception, right? If your perception is wrong, your decision will always be wrong. If your perception is wrong, your decision will always be wrong, right? If you're driving on the way, right? And I'll give a practical example of this. I went to a parking lot today. I went to a place, there was no parking space, the security guy walked up to me. He told me to park in a particular place. I told him that my car can't park in that space. And he said, I noticed how a bit rude the guy was, so I just moved out and parked somewhere else. And someone just said to me to crack a joke to this guy, right? And then I walked up to the guy, this is a security guy, and I said to the guy that, now, wow, Oga, who offended you this morning? And the guy now looked at me and says, what do I mean? Still with his with his sad face. And I'm like, why they smile? The guy now looked at me and said to me, I know be madman now. I know we just see person this morning and I just smile anyhow. Now, a part of me was going to probably say something like, oh, sorry, or just even maybe give him his own words or give him his own, what's the word? Show a reflection of how he's reflecting. No, I just smiled and then I walked away, right? And I mentioned my cousin that naturally, from the way the guy was telling me not to park there, I would have naturally wind down and tell him that we're not fighting, but a part of me said to myself that this guy might be going through stuff. So the only thing that stopped me from not being offensive to him, right, is to tell myself a perception that this guy might have woken up in a wrong place. As far as I'm concerned, he might be going through different issues. He might be going through boy-girl issues. He might be broke. There are so many issues that is making him act that way. So you see that my decision, right, the most fundamental factor of my decision is my perception. So I think that it's important for we all, first of all, to get the right impression of perception of life. And the most ultimate perception of life is to take away yourself from every equation. You are not the most important person in every situation. When you see that, first of all, what you see that it kills your ego first. Your ego is reduced, right? Because, ego is the enemy, like they say, right? Because you think you're not the most important person, you pay more attention to other people, right? You probably listen more, you probably talk less. You see how all of these simple things to the average person shows up as you are now a more pleasant person or you're naturally a pleasant person. So I think clarity of purpose and perception is the first thing you must first get right, right? Whether in business, whether in health, whether in anything else, right? It's extremely important, right? So I don't know if Akshay is here. There's a conversation I had with Akshay, I think 2-3 years ago. I'm not sure if you remember his conversation. And he said to me that, Eizu, when you want to make a decision, right? I've always felt that there's too much pressure on me, just on a lot of things. And he said to me that I don't know what that question was. That question was something around, let me just live life. Let me live my age. And he said, Eizu, that the secret to being mature is before you make any decision or you say anything, you maybe add extra 10 years to your age. It changes how you see things, right? And that one conversation, that perception, I carried it all from that 3 years. And now that sort of changes a lot of things, right? So I'm in a situation where I need to have some type of conversation. I'm asking myself that, what would the 10 years, what's my 10 years from now, I'll be my mid-40s, right? And I go, okay, what would the mid-40s do in this situation, right? So it's important that we have certain perceptions. Those perceptions will drive our ground rules on certain things, right? And that thing I think that's important under objective function is to define your objectives in life. So first thing, my first objective in life is that I will bury myself in the service of others because others are more important than me. That's a personal belief, and that personal belief came from my perception. And this is my own ground rules, right? So if you must be the guy who, and that doesn't mean that you're not going to make wrong decisions in life. I think life is a set of activities, right? You win some, you lose some. Sometimes you lose some battles, and eventually you win the war. Nobody wins all the battles. Life is a journey, and in that journey, sometimes you get lost. So this culture is not about living a perfect life or making all the perfect decisions all the time, but at least cumulatively, you should make more good decisions than bad decisions, and ensure that the good decisions compensate for some of the bad decisions for the times where you miss the point. And when you miss the point, always find a way to find your way back, right? And don't beat yourself too hard when you miss the point, because sometimes you miss the point. It's just the way life is. I mean, so one of the things I've learned about objective function is define your objective in life and let your objective define your ground rules. And your objective and your ground rules are a subject of your perception, right? I have in my head, I have so many perceptions I carry all along. Like, for example, leadership is not a position, leadership is a state of mind. I say this to myself every single time. I mean, I had this question first. I had the first thing that is like within my family tree, right? We're a family of 5. I'm the last child. And the decision that is made in the family. And I tell myself that leadership is not a position. So you don't have to wait for the people who are older than you if you can make the decisions on their behalf, right? And when I say decisions, it's not necessarily decisions. It might be choices as well. It might be contributions, right? So one of the things for making great decisions is have central ideologies to life. These central ideologies of life is what you call objective function. So objective function is your big why, is your big impression, is your perceptions, is your goals, is the things you ultimately want to be, right? I want to be the guy that buries myself in the service of others, right? And that changes everything else, right? I'm stressed. One of the biggest therapy I discovered over 10 years ago is that when I'm stressed, right, I find people to help as part of my stress mechanism, right? So I'm really stressed at home and I just take a walk. And taking a walk, I stop by the POS machine by the road and I take some, if I can afford it, in times where I can afford it, maybe I take some things, I take maybe cash, I'm going, if someone's selling something and I think that the price of that thing, if it won't cut my pocket, I pay a bit more and make the person happier. Let me say the person who's maybe selling fruits by the side or the security guard that greets me, I say, how's your family? I take this one for the weekend. I notice that every time I do that and there's a smile, like it feels like that smile is inversely proportional to my stress. Now, this exercise could never have happened if I did not have an objective function and ground rules. And there are so many ground rules you can pick from. So when you get a ground rule, you make that ground rule ideology in life. So one of them is bury myself in the service of others, and that guides all the other decisions I make, right? Second ground rule is never pass on an error, right? It doesn't matter if you're the one that caused it. As long as that error is on your table, make sure you don't pass that error to someone else. That's an ideology. So these ideologies, right, after a while become the systems you have created, right, to solve bigger problems, even subconsciously and very, very, very subconsciously. I think that's the right word, very subconsciously. So it seems people just look at you like you seem to be making all the right decisions at the right time. But no, it's not that you're making right decisions at the right time, it's just that you have an impression. Like someone said something years ago and it made sense to me, and he said, look, you don't rise to the level of your goal. You don't rise to the level of your goal, you fall to the level of your systems, right? You don't rise to the level of your goal, you fall to the level of the system. So the systems are the ideologies and the frameworks that you have created. So first thing is clarity of purpose, which is what I like to call objective functions. Now, second, so I'll put this in step 1, step 2, step 3 for decision making. So the first step for making a great decision is to be a particular kind of person with a particular kind of ideology, right? So if you say that leadership in a position, it means that even if you're not called to be a leader, you'll be a leader, even though you're not given that position. That's an ideology. Now, second part of it is the decision variables. So decision variables are those parts of your life, those items in your life, right, that determines the degree of which the degree of excellence. I think that's the word, degree of excellence, if there's any word like that, right? So we're all a product of certain things, right? You can't make progress if you haven't got this. For example, let me give an example. Knowledge is a decision variable, right? Let me give an example. If you say that you have a objective function to be healthy, you will never be healthy if you don't understand. For example, I said one of the decision variables is knowledge. If you have an intention to be healthy, if you don't have certain knowledge, your intention will never carry you to be healthy, right? So, for example, if you don't know that, if you don't know, remember keyword know. So knowledge is a variable, right? If you don't know that too much sugar is bad for your health, right? Maybe too much red meat is bad for your health. Too much white flour is bad for your health, right? So knowledge is a conversation. So there are different things you must understand. Your objective, second and third one is constraints, right? So those objective decision variables are one, knowledge, right? So and for each of these objective decision variables, you've got to create a system for them. So one, knowledge. What system are you creating in your life to steadily acquire knowledge? Right. So let me give an example. You want to be healthier. You want to gain knowledge on how to be healthier. What are the systems you're creating? Else, you just have a wish to be healthier. What differentiates the guy that has a wish and the guy that achieves is actually the system they create in between. Right. So one guy says, I want to lose weight. The other guy says, I want to lose weight. Following decision variables to make. See, the other one stops at intention, wishful thinking. The other one goes ahead to create a system. So, for example, to be healthier, I have to have a system for my diet, a system for my workout, a system for my, what are the variables of, what are the decision variables for health? Diet, right? Workouts, sleep, rest, right? So for workout, what are my systems for workout? Maybe I'm going to, at a particular time of the day, I'm going to take a walk, right? At a particular time of the week, I'm going to go to the gym, right? I'm going to have a gym buddy. I'm going to have a workout friend or somebody who is my a long walk partner. So these are all systems you're creating to achieve that. And this thing you can do it with literally almost everything. I mean, health is a part of your life. You can do this within your finance. You can do your business. For example, in my business, I say, okay, look, I want to make, say, let me give an example. I want to leave this year with, say, 100 million naira as net profit for my business, right? What are the systems I need to have? What are the decision variables? Once again, knowledge will show up as a decision variable. If I'm going to make 100 million, I have to have the knowledge, because the knowledge of making let me assume I made 10 million at the end of last year. But this year I said I'm going to make 100 million, right? The knowledge of making the knowledge you have to run a 10 million naira business is not the same type of knowledge you have to run a 100 million naira business. By the way, the knowledge to run a 10 million naira business is a lot of hard work, right? The people that make 100 million naira don't work as that make 10 million naira. Let me tell you the truth. Having hung around people from different levels, right? And those are the guys that make certain amount of money create hard work as their objective function. The guys that make 100 million probably don't create hard work as objective function. However, they realize that there's a level of hard work we get to where hard work becomes inversely proportional to growth. And this is actually a thing that people don't even realize in business and in decision making, that not everything does hard work solve. I mean, hard work is important, but as you grow higher, more hard work becomes detrimental to your success. It's like what happens to play basketball. To play basketball, you need to be tall, but you can get to a height in basketball where the taller you get, it becomes counterproductive. There are a lot of things that have that law of diminishing returns, like an inverted U shape, right? So knowledge is one. And so if you notice, no matter whatever case study I use, whether I'm using health, whether I'm using finance, whether I'm using business, one decision variable would always be there. There are a set of variables. Remember, knowledge is always a thing, right? Of course, knowledge can be expanded into other things, wisdom, skills, ability, whatever it is. Those are all output of knowledge, right? Your skill is a product of your knowledge, right? So one, and knowledge can be tacit, right? And it can be non-tacit. It can be formal, it can be informal, it can be direct, it can be indirect. Knowledge does not always mean read a book. Knowledge is get a mentor. Knowledge is get somebody who's ahead of you on that thing you want to learn, right? So for example, if I say I want to lose weight, right? Knowledge in that case might be to make friends with somebody who was maybe, I'm just saying, maybe a 180 pound and has reduced to say 120 pound, or used to be 130 kg, is now 90 kg. Just hanging around that guy you get to learn about how he was able to lose weight in such a short period of time. So first of all is knowledge. Second one is stakeholders. One of the biggest factors to people not making good decisions in their lives, right, is the people that they surround them with, people that affect them and people that they affect, right? So you can't grow or constantly make the right decision if you don't have the right stakeholders in life. And in the context of business, it's basically the same thing. And I keep referring to business because I think business is sort of like my, right? Business consultant, management structure. And I've come to see that. So I was talking to somebody today, the place I went to today, and the guys did 3 billion, right, in sales last year. And we said, let's 10x that, 30 billion. One of the first things I told him to do that if you're going to do 30 billion this year, then you've got to have a board and make sure that there's nobody on that board, right, that does not have a business that is making at least 30 billion, right? And the guy said, why? I said, because sometimes the secret to scaling is by engaging somebody who's already there, right? We all know that story about, oh, if you hang around 5 broke people, you'll be the 6th. If you hang around 5 rich people, you'll be the 6th. Whether it sounds motivational or not is a fact. So stakeholders are important people who determine, and it's such as everything. Every day we have decisions on different things we want to do, or want to lose this habit, want to gain this habit. You're not going to gain this habit if you don't have the right stakeholders. So let me give you an example. Somebody who says to himself, okay, this year I don't want to make impulse spending. Maybe you have a habit of after work you stop somewhere, you hang out before you go, right? And you say, this year my new resolution is I'm not going to hang out. I'm going to just from work, I'm going to go home. But you know that you never get that achieved if the same stakeholders are the same stakeholders you have when you're leaving. Same as everything else. So first thing first is knowledge, right? Second one is stakeholders, right? I read a book that gave us a great idea of variables to be successful. And I recommend that book to people here. It's called Your Next 5 Moves, right? And when I looked at that book and on the next 5 moves, it hits me that those 5 moves are actually the decision variables you must make for you to scale. And I'm assuming that for somebody here, their decision variables is towards growth. You have decision variables towards other things, but let me assume that everybody here is trying to be better than they did last time, which is growth. One of the key things that must happen, if that's going to happen, is that there are 5 steps that you must have, and I'll just assume those 5 steps. First of all is have the knowledge, have the right knowledge, right, to master yourself, right? Having the right knowledge to master yourself changes the dynamics of literally everything, right? So what does master yourself mean? Knowing you'll be shortchanging yourself if there are people that know a lot more things about you than you know about yourself. You'll be shocked at how many people have weaknesses that everybody around them know, except for them. Everyone knows their weaknesses apart from them, right? Johari Swing throws a lot of insights to this. The worst place to be is to be in a place where everybody knows your weakness apart from you, right? It's like, practically speaking, like you having body odor and walking into a room, everybody knows you have body odor apart from you, right? If it would be best if it's only you that knows you have body odor apart from other people, because at least if you know, be close to people, right? Or you get a judgment. But the problem is that you don't know. So I think what's worse than what you don't know is you not knowing what you don't know, literally, right? So the first step. Second step is stakeholder management. So in that book, what I call stakeholder management and understanding the key stakeholders in your life, what he called it is finding the right team, right? Because stakeholders are your team. So mastering, and a lot of people haven't mastered how to build a great team, right? So for anybody who's going to grow this year, one of the decisions you must make, even the decision you must make to make the decisions you want to make, is that you must have the right people in your corner. Right. Having the right people in your corner changes literally everything. So I think the first step was mastering yourself. Second one was mastering, having the right people. And then third one is being able to be a value to the right people. Right. So I've seen people who have the right people in their corner, but the right people in their corner, they don't. Okay, so how can I say now? Everybody will say stuff like your network determines your net worth determines your net worth, right? So everybody jumps around trying to get the right network. But haven't you seen people who have the right network but can't have value, their life hasn't changed, literally, right? So I'll give a good example. You hear people say stuff like, oh, if I like my uncle was down, But do you know how many people who their uncle is Dangote, but their life has not changed, right? So if you find anybody in that situation, what you have found out is that, yes, the guy has the right stakeholders, but hasn't been able to add value to those stakeholders, which brings me to a variable that you need to make the right decisions or to grow. That variable is the variable of value. So, and they come in the right order: knowledge first, people second, and then value to the people that you know, right? Don't forget, we live in a world where everybody tries to take. Value is giving, right? So you know all the right people. What are you doing with those right people in terms of value, right? And I think that that's extremely important to be able to deliver on that, right? So I've talked about three variables that determine the right decisions: the love for knowledge, the love for people and stakeholders, the right stakeholders, because you can love the wrong stakeholders. There are people who are consistently in love with people who will self-sabotage them, right? And one of the most powerful things I've seen, one of the most powerful example I've seen in this is even boy-girl relationship, right? You'll be shocked at how many people are in a place where their biggest self-sabotage is the people that, especially for people who are maybe not married yet, right? I remember back then somebody said something to me, and I used to say the difference between now and the next 10 years, the people you meet and the things that you know. And the person said, yes, there are three. You keep saying two. I said, what's the third one? He says, the person you marry, right? You'll be shocked at how many people end up in the wrong situations just because of that factor. So why am I driving that in this? For you to constantly make the right decision, you've got to be the guy, right, who literally has a system that attracts the right people, and the same system, right, removes the wrong people. Japanese people have a term for this called pokayoka. That it's not enough to what's more important than making the right decision is having a system that stops from making the wrong decisions, right? So every time Japanese guys create anything and they get it right, they don't stop at getting it right. They create a system in that process that they got right to make sure they can't get it wrong. So let me give a good example of this. Have we all been in a situation where we try to send a mail to say Google has this feature? Who's noticed of recent that Google's algorithm, when you're sending a Gmail and you say, please find attached, and you forget to create an attachment, right? Or attach a document and you click on send, what happens? It doesn't send, right? So that mechanism is called pokayoka. So part of your decision variable is to have a pokayoka in your life. So what's pokayoka? Pokayoka is a Japanese word for error proofing. So everybody has got to have a principle in their life that error proofs, right? So error proofing, the Japanese guys are the best with this. And anybody that wants to understand decision making and excellence, you've got to understudy Japanese. Those guys are enigma when it comes to decision making. And I mean, I'll give you an example. Just Japanese, right? During the Second World War, right? Accepting when Hiroshima bomb happened, they were going to be way more bombed. But the fact that they even made the right decision to surrender saved them about 10 million people who would have died carelessly. Japanese guys live the longest. Japanese guys live the longest. They live the happiest, right? They are very reliable. I mean, they've given us the greatest brands in the world, from Toyota to Motorola, from Motorola to Toshiba, from Toshiba to Nintendo to Sony. These are all reliable brands. And Japanese guys said that for them to be successful, they created a culture in their parenting style where they teach their kids to have a pokayoka. And there's so many examples of pokayoka. Even in technology, in business, we have pokayokas all the time. You walk into an elevator says 10, maximum of 10 people, right? And then what the guys in the factory will do is they understand that the maximum is 10 people. But let me not use 10 people. Let me say maximum is 1,000 kg, right? What the guys will do in the factory as a pokayoka is they know that even though the maximum is 1,000 kg, they know that the 11th person, out of being in a hurry, might still try to enter the elevator. So what do the Japanese guys do? Of course, everybody now does it, but they learned that culture from Japanese guys. Japanese guys will put a sensor that if the 11th person enters, the elevator door will not close. Like that is not enough. They'll still put one more layer and put an alarm So that means if you try to enter first, the door will not close, so you're not going anywhere. Then two, the alarm would go off, right? So that's called error proofing, right? Actually, the real term is derogatory. The real term in Japan, in the real translation of Japanese, is actually pokayoka, is actually foolproof, meaning that they want to prove yourself of foolishness, because we all have self-sabotage, we all make foolish mistakes sometimes. But what is the system you're creating? So let me give a good example. Early days of my life, one of the things I did that I think I'm forever grateful for was to surround myself with people who I'm afraid for them to hear me fumble, right? So there are certain things, let me give you example. Some of them are in this room. There are certain things that I don't want Uncle Sheyi to hear that I did, right? Or in Chukuma to hear that I did. Now, what does that do? So I said that Chukuma and Uncle Sheyi are like my that conversation, right? So decision making don't just happen. Decision making happens when you first have the right perception of life. There's no such thing as in my life I can live it how I want to live. That's what average people say. When you become a truly authentic leader, there's no such thing as your life affects other people, your decision affects other people. So whenever you want to make a decision, you ask yourself, how does decision affect people that matter in my life, right? Your parents, your family, your staff, right? How does this decision affect you? Second thing is make sure that your decision variables are equipped with knowledge, equipped with the right people, and equipped with the system to take away the wrong people and the wrong decision. So the same way the elevator put a sensor in and an alarm, the same way Google Map puts a algorithm where you can't click on send without an attachment because you wrote please find attached. I think the most interesting one I've noticed of recent time is how your car cannot start if it's not on park. I'm sure everybody noticed it. Your car can only start when it's on park and on drive. So when it's on park and on neutral. That thing was started by Toyota. Once again, remember, Japanese guys own Toyota. They noticed that there was a particular time where they were having too many domestic accidents from kids. I mean, my 4-year-old, if I leave my 4-year-old in the car and I leave the car on, I bet you he's not going to stay still. He's going to try to press the horn, change the gear, to move the steering. So that means if I leave the key in the ignition, he can start the car. But remember, if the key is on ignition, right, and it's not on park, he can't start the car. So what is the chances of my son at 4-year-old knowing how to start the car and move the car from park to drive? It's literally almost 0 points, less than 1%, literally, right? 0 point something percent. So I think that that's very important. Then lastly, before I go, is what you call constraints. Remember, there are 3 factors for making a great decision. And by the way, this concept is from something called mathematical optimization in operation research. The last one is constraints. There's nothing that stops a man than the bots that people use when they describe them. So let me give an example. Imagine if somebody says, and let me say, man, the guy's name is John. And somebody says, oh, do you know John? And somebody says, oh, John, yeah, I know John. Oh, John is an interesting guy. John is very, very intelligent. Oh, John is very wealthy. You know, John is very kind. But they now put a bot. That bot is what we call in mathematics a constraint. And it doesn't matter if you get number 1 and number 2 right. Remember, number 1 was objective function. Number 2 was decision variables. If you don't get right constraints, right, your number 2 and number 1 will never make you make the right decision. So understanding all the constraints in your life and all the constraints in your decisions will stop you from making the wrong decisions, right? And that constraints on a personal level are the bots that people have in your life. I bumped into and I got into an app. It was Gen Z's in my office that were using it, and it was an interesting app. I was trying to collect, okay, so it's one of my Gen Z's WhatsApp status. It was this thing called Anonymous. And I thought it was very interesting. I called him and said, explain how Anonymous works. And it was an interesting app. It's an app that lets people give you feedback about you, right? And you never know who gave you the feedback. And I want everybody here to try it, to find your own constraints, the things that are stopping you from optimizing your decisions or your life. Those things that people say about you, and they put a bot to it. So try it. Download Anonymous. I think the app's called Anonymous. Copy the link, share it on your WhatsApp status. Tell your guys to click on it and give you feedback. Because there are people that will never tell you the truth because they don't want to hurt your feeling and they don't want you to look at them funny because they told you the truth. But with Anonymous, people don't have that problem. I've infected all of my clients with it. I tell my clients, if you want your employees to give you real feedback, right, make it anonymous. Bring the app, let them, my staff gave me feedback on Anonymous, and I looked at it, I'm like, wow, I didn't even know this was a thing. Something I was doing that they didn't like. Right. So I think that that's really important. That there's so many constraints that you can have. And when you find these constraints, it's also important for you to look at the degree of it. So there are constraints in your life that you cannot change, maybe because of your temperament and your personality. However, being aware of those constraints and finding the compensation for those constraints, for the ones you can't change, first of all, almost anything in life can be changed. But let me assume that there are some that even when you change them, they will still be residual. You know, in risk management, in project management, we have this thing we call primary risk, secondary risk, and residual risk. When you solve some risk, there are some part of the risk that will still remain, right? There will some part that will still remain, right? Now, if, for example, you change every part of you and you still find that one that still remains and you can't change it, right? What you might now need to do is to create a compensation advantage for it, right? So, for example, I'm choleric, right? Because I'm choleric, by my nature, I like to be direct with people. But remember that people don't like being direct. People don't like people being direct to them. You know, I grew up thinking that you should treat people how you want to be treated. As I grow older, I'm realizing that treating people how you want to be treated, because I mean, I don't mind direct feedback. Because I don't mind direct feedback doesn't mean that other people don't mind direct feedback. So I've changed my perception. So we're back to number one again, objective function, perception. I've changed my perception that I'm not going to treat people how I want to be treated. I'm going to treat people, more importantly, how they want to be treated. How they want to be treated. So I figured out that as right, I'm very nice. So, and sometimes it happens very subconsciously. So these days, I've learned to compensate by ending all of my think. Right? Think. So I'm talking to my colleague in the office and I'm like, oh, you know what? I noticed that there's a particular guy in my office who I've struggled with certain things about just courtesy, and I'll have questions with different things. I mean, yesterday I went to buy something for the office and the thing was heavy. And there were two ladies and me and him. And while I was paying for it, I looked outside. There was a big deep freezer for the office because we have a home office, they live in the office. And I noticed that he watched the kids. Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. I just saw your message now. So I round up now. I noticed that he watched the two ladies carry heavy the heavy freezer into the. So naturally, I would have said to him, oh, don't you know how to treat women? You know, you should carry the fridge. And, you know, but I still found myself very subconsciously saying that. But I ended it with, oh, or what do you think? Do you think it's appropriate for the ladies to carry the fridge while you are there? Or what do you think? So that what do you think sort of softens my direct approach to it. Now, I'm not going to stop being direct. I mean, I'm learning to reduce being direct, but stopping it to be a mirage because it's a choleric thing, right? But I've learned to end that direct with asking for people's opinion as part of that process, right? So decision making is not just about you making the right decisions. It's also about you creating a system where if for any reason you make the wrong decisions, you can almost auto-correct it through a template. So my template in this case is, what do you think? Right, so I'll probably just pause at this point, right? And maybe have people take answers. And one last thing I wanted to say is when you truly become an authentic leader and you can lead yourself, it's not enough that you become the guy that's capable with the right decisions. It's also important for you to build the kind of business and the kind of life where you how can I explain now? Where don't be the guy who has gotten it right, but hasn't been able to teach other people how to also get it right. Right? It's not enough that you get it right. You have to come back and carry other people on that journey to getting it right. So a time will come in your life where you get it right. And I was talking to someone who's done brilliantly well. They were telling me like it was his 35th wedding anniversary was yesterday. I just called him. This guy's a military general. He rose to the highest rank in the military. You know, he's just retired. You know, he's married 35. He's gotten everything right. And I just told him, sir, you know that you've gotten all these things right, but there's one more thing you need to do. He said, what? I said, I think you need to go back and teach younger junior officers how to get it right. Not just to be military generals in their career, but to be military generals with successful marriages, successful health, successful family, successful personal development, because this guy is also successful with other businesses that he runs. He's one of those guys who came up diligent as a military general because while he was in the military, he built real entrepreneurship businesses that are doing well. So I think that please don't forget that it's not enough to be the guy who makes the right decision to be a leader. Leadership is not complete until you show the way. In all of the definition of leadership I've seen, and I'll end with these quotes, in all of the leadership definitions I've seen, the most outstanding one to me is that a leader is someone that knows the way, goes the way, and can come back to show others the same way. I hope this was useful to someone. Thank you, and God bless you guys.
Thank you so much, Mr. Eizu. Really impactful. I have taken loads of notes. My book is already filled. But yes, this is a moment for questions and answers. We'll just leave the floor open for quick questions and answers. Our time is a bit fast spent. But yes, it's from the house. Do we have any questions from Mr. Eizu? Okay, I can see the chat. Okay, Daniel is saying thank you. Great. Any questions? You can signify by raising your hands or dropping it on the group on the chat box. Usually, where I come from, if people don't ask questions, it means I should be the one to ask them questions. But no, let's not do that today. Okay. I mean, in summary, I've learned so much. If I could just say, I think 3 things have peaked, especially when he says steps to making the right decisions as a leader, to steps to taking the right leadership decision. Of course, not just at your place of work, but in every aspect of life. You need to master yourself and you need to love knowledge. So mastering yourself and the constant push to improve yourself. You also need to have the right people around you. Because as I said, your network is your network is your net worth. So that's very important. And of course, you also need to be you need to be of value to the right people around you. So yeah, those are the things I've noted. And I pray for every one of us that yes, these 3 factors shall start to reflect in all of our lives. Mr. Eizu, it's a pleasure to have you. I believe in the future we will definitely call upon you again for another program. Thank you so much for your insight. These are powerful. We've been blessed to have you speak to us. I'm sure we've learned a lot. Someone is asking on the chat box can the materials be shared on the slides or the slides for those who are in the position of taking notes? Is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. At a point, I just went off the tangent of the slide because I realized I couldn't go through all of it. It's about the 13 slides in the PowerPoint. So yes, I'd be willing to share that with you, which you can share with the rest of them.
Okay, awesome. I'll get that from you and share with on our platform. I have another question from Brother Okbe, who is asking that how much can decision making be outsourced? How much can decision making be outsourced?
Okay, so sadly, right, it's one of those things that should not be outsourced, right? Depending on what context you're looking at. So let me look at it in business, right? As you start up your career or you start up your small business, right? You start up as an operations person, right? And then you move to being management, and then you move to being CEO. Like literally, if you were supposed to run bottom top. As you go higher, your work reduces. You know, when you start a business, you can do a lot of things. As you go higher in your business, right, and you become the CEO and the ultimate goal of being a chairman when you have a board, right? A time comes where the only thing you should do in your business is networking and decision making. So average people are constantly, or below average people are constantly trying to outsource decision making, right? Decision making, in my own opinion, is like the heart. In my opinion, I think you should outsource every other thing apart from strategic decision making, because decision making is really strategy, and you can't outsource strategy. So at what level can decision making be outsourced? At the most minimal level, in my own opinion. Don't be the guy who is constantly waiting for other people to make decisions for you, right? Because every time that happens, that's literally what we call outsourcing decision making. Every time you let other people make decisions for you, you should change the ability to take control of your life, right? So I don't believe that people should outsource decision making. Is lack of is outsourcing decision making that makes Nigeria a very religious country, in my own opinion, because you're constantly outsourcing. You'll be shocked at how many people say stuff like, "Oh, my pastor said," right? And there's nothing wrong with your pastor said, but I mean, people that, do you know how many people that don't go to hospital when they are sick because the pastor said they should not go to the hospital, right? So that's outsourcing. That's what average people do. So I don't think that it's something people should do. Matter of fact, I think that average people are constantly outsourcing not just their decision to somebody else. They are even outsourcing their decision to the future. You know, people that are solving today's problem today. There are people who are trying to solve the problem today, but they transfer it to tomorrow. You know, procrastination. Procrastination is really outsourcing today's decision to tomorrow. Think about it, right? So I don't know if that sort of helps to put that in context.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I believe part of the things you have said earlier is getting knowledge. Getting knowledge, of course, if you have the knowledge necessary, decision making will not necessarily need to be outsourced. Once again, thank you for the time. The media and communication team has reminded us that the program is currently live on YouTube. And of course, we can share the links to the YouTube page after the program. So yes, the link will be available for everybody to go and rewatch. It's packed full of so many insights, so many things have been shared here. Even I would like to review it again because I know I couldn't take note of everything I was hearing. But yeah, Mr. Eizu, it's a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for your time. I think at this point, we'll jump straight into prayer requests and testimony. So if you have